The Mandalorian Episode 1, Chapter 17, The Apostate. Season 3 kicks off with a bang as we start off by witnessing a Mandalorian initiation ceremony done by the Children of the Watch. At first, I wasn't sure if this was simply a flashback or not, mainly because there were so many Mandos here from Din Djarin's cult. Which, if you remember from the book of Boba Fett, Paz Vizsla stated very clearly that everyone from their tribe was killed by the Empire on Nevarro. And now, there were only 3 of them left, the Armorer, Din, and himself. So, to see so many Children of the Watch here was a bit jarring. Especially when the monster attacks them during the ceremony and Din arrives to save the day, confirming that no, this is not in fact a flashback but present day. Which makes me wonder, how the heck were they able to recruit this many randos and get this much armor for them? Then again, seeing how awful they were when fighting against the monster, you could tell the standards of the Children of the Watch have dropped dramatically, and they're basically taking anyone with a heartbeat at this point to join their cult. Which did hurt this scene for me, as while the monster attack initially was pretty darn cool to see, what wasn't so cool was how dragged out it was and made the Mandos look incredibly incompetent, stupid, and weak. I mean, maybe if there were 1 or 2 of them against that thing, sure, but a whole platoon of Mandos against some random lake monster? Not to mention, they could have easily just shot their backpack missiles straight into the monster's mouth, which for the majority of the time was open and easily dispose of it. But nope, instead Din had to arrive to save the day, otherwise they would have all died right there and then. Suffice to say, I have mixed emotions with this opening scene. Din then meets with the Armorer to confirm that he can redeem himself, with us getting pretty much a rehash of the scene from the Book of Boba Fett. Which is, hey, you're a disgrace to the tribe. Okay, but if I bathe at the mines of Mandalore, I can become a Mandalorian again, right? Right. Yeah, almost beat by beat the same scene, which after the Book of Boba Fett, this seemed rather repetitive to say the least. Din afterwards travels to Nevarro to bring back an old ally to aid him in his quest, and during this travel through the hyperspace, we get this imposing scene from what looks to be the shadows or silhouettes of live-action Purrgil. And yeah, I'll be the first to admit it that while I wasn't initially the biggest fan of the Purrgil during their debut in Rebels, I gotta say in live action they're a whole different story in terms of the coolness factor. And we have yet to actually even fully see them too, so yeah, can't wait for that. Once on Nevarro, we see Din impressed with the positive change happening in the city and all of that, which this kinda felt like deja vu all over again, as I thought we already seen somewhat of a scene like this back in Season 2, when Din returned to Nevarro to see how Greef Karga changed everything around for the better. Of course, there was a bit more smaller details here this time around, but it's still technically the same exact scene, I feel, with just a slightly different delivery. Mando then tells Greef that he wants IG-11 to accompany him to Mandalore, but of course that's a bit hard to do, since IG-11 self-destructed himself back in Season 1. But hey, luckily for Din, it seems that the most important pieces of IG had somehow survived? Which, I don't know, makes me question how his upper body is still intact when he self-destructed straight from his chest. Yeah, that's a bit interesting. Okay, moving on. With Din unable to repair the droid himself, and then we get a somewhat cringy scene of zombie IG where Din somehow forgets how to aim his blaster. Greef then afterwards has him take IG to some Anzellans to try to do it for him instead. And this, on the bright side, was a neat funny scene with the little critters and the back and forth between them, Greef and Din, plus some Grogu shenanigans and all of that. It was nice, but otherwise nothing really comes from this other than to tell Din that he needs to go on a video game fetch quest to find a new memory circuit to repair IG-11. But the episode never really answers on why Din needs IG-11 specifically so badly for this. I mean, he can literally take any droid he wants, as after all, he only needs it to go spelunking for him on Mandalore. Yet the response we keep getting from Din about this is, because he's my friend. Yeah, that's why I need him. I can only send my droid friend down to Mandalore to test if it's really poisoned down there. Oh boy. Then there's a small pirate subplot that happens on Navarro too. But in my opinion, it's not too great, as it's basically some pirates who are willing to get killed over wanting to get wasted in a school due to feeling nostalgic. Yeah, it's as stupid as it sounds, and it doesn't really lead to anything. I mean, we do get a dogfight in space, which looks cool and all, but again, it doesn't really lead to anywhere than giving us a short cameo from the space equivalent of Davy Jones. It's nice to see, but it's kind of like, okay? Then arrives on Kalevala, another planet within the Mandalore system, to meet with a depressed Bo-Katan, who since has abandoned her plans to retake Mandalore as her forces have, well, abandoned her due to Bo not having the Darksaber. Which is a bit strange if you ask me, due to the fact that she somehow commanded them before just fine without the Darksaber. Yet now, suddenly it's an issue. Interesting. Anyway, she fills us in on her current situation and also informs Din on where exactly to find the Mines of Mandalore for him to bathe in the living waters in order to be forgiven for his transgressions. Which, again, is a bit odd, as couldn't Din just ask the armorer about the location instead of going all the way to Bo-Katan about this question? It's as well a bit humorous as Bo tells Din not to do it as the planet has been poisoned, plundered, and polluted, with him then calling her out on that by reminding her that she had said before that the curse was a lie, and tells her to make up her mind. I mean, I think the writers should make up their mind on where they're going with Mandalorian Season 3, but that's another story. Having said that, all this talk about droid parts, I figured we were gonna be going to Tatooine for Din to meet up with some Jawas. You know, because they're the most likeliest to have a memory circuit for IG-11. But then he's like going to Bo talking about joining their factions together and going to Mandalore with him, and it's like completely disconnected from what the last few scenes were setting up, with the episode then ending with Din vowing to go there after finding a suitable partner after Bo rejects him, which I'm assuming that will now be Boba Fett. And if that's the case, does that make the whole IG-11 memory circuit subplot irrelevant now already? Okay. Overall, this was a decent season opener that I think scratched that Mandalorian itch for so many folks who were missing it. But I honestly can't say it was great, especially in comparison to Season 2's premiere, which was just on a totally different level, all with the story, writing, and cinematic-wise. Even Season 1's premiere was better narratively despite not being as flashy as this one. And that's just it. Season 3's premiere felt to me a bit underwhelming. I mean, the writing was wooden, especially as we're coming off from Andor, which had brilliant writing. So the bad writing here really sticks out like a sore thumb. Plus, not only was the pacing of the episode pretty chaotic, but there also wasn't much storyline payoff, with it all being spectacle and little substance. I guess their plan was to cram in a lot of cool looking scenes at the expense of adding little to the story, or almost nothing at all, other than to grab people's attention, which they really don't need to do that with The Mandalorian, as everyone is looking forward to this series. After all, Din visits like 3 planets and has a space battle all in one episode, yet nothing really happened if you think about it. And did I mention how rather short this episode was too? Maybe that's why it didn't have a good flow and the pacing is all off. And had they, well, made this episode longer, then maybe that would have helped it out by quite a bit. But for whatever reason, they didn't do this, and it seems to me like they just wanted to have a lot shown in the first episode, yet keep it very condensed, even if it hurts the overall episode, and again, not much really happens. All done just so they would have a good variety of footage to use for the trailer, which I'm pretty sure used 90% of its clips from this one episode alone. Also, add to the fact that for anyone who didn't watch Book of Boba Fett and are only now just tuning into this episode, then they're gonna be completely lost on what's going on. I mean, how did the previously on segment at the start not even cover this? Are they trying to deliberately confuse the casual viewers? To me, it just seems nonsensical. Like, people are gonna be asking, how did Din get Grogu back from Luke Skywalker? What's up with this new ship and when did he get it? How does the armorer know that Din showed his face, and so on? As you can see, I thought it would have been handled better, but for whatever reason, nope, it really wasn't. I know some people may hate me for saying this, but I feel like Chapter 5 Return of the Mandalorian from Book of Boba Fett should have been Season 3's premiere instead. As not only that episode I think is far superior to this one, but it just connects between the seasons so much better for obvious reasons. Plus the writing is actually good there too. Unfortunately, they screwed things up by forcing that into the Book of Boba Fett for... I have no idea. I mean, it felt weird as heck back then, and it still feels super weird today. Anyway, I know this won't be a popular take for many, but it is what it is, and I didn't think episode 1 of season 3 was all that. It wasn't bad, I still had fun with it, and visually it looked fantastic. But I don't know, I suppose I had much higher expectations or standards for what it would be, and maybe a bit of that is on me. That said, Jon Favreau, who wrote this episode, definitely could have done better, at least in my humble opinion. And that was my take on this episode of The Mandalorian. Let me know what you all thought about the episode in the comments below, and if you haven't already, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.